I have tried several different psychedelic and hallucinogenic drugs, LSD, magic mushrooms, nutmeg and ketamine, and I smoke weed on a regular basis. I've never had a bad trip in my life, but somehow I wasn't 100% satisfied with my experiences. I heard a lot of drug stories about people and how they saw all kinds of crazy shit, but in all my drug experiences I never had any hallucinations, just altered perception of things, like colors get brighter or walls seem like they're breathing, and CEVs at best. When I saw a picture of the plant I was shocked. I know this plant, it grows absolutely everywhere. Within 20 minutes I was back home with 6 flowers and 20 leaves. I waited until next morning. I always prefer tripping during the day, and made 2 cups of tea from the plant material. Now for the fun part. 9 AM, the only thing I eat when I wake up is 1 banana. I drink the first cup of tea and decide not to drink the second cup because I never tried this before and who knows how I would react to it. 9:45 AM, I have to go take a piss, so I get up from my couch and realize I can barely stand. I remember reading about this being described as gravity increased 2x strength, and that's exactly what it feels like. I stumble to the toilet and walk into the wall because I missed the bathroom doorway. This does not worry me though because I know this is normal. I actually feel happy at how fucked I am. Starting to piss was also quite difficult, and when I was done I felt like my bladder was still full. 10 AM, in the last 15 minutes I had gone to the toilet 4 times, but I only managed to piss a few drops out. I give up on trying to relieve the feeling of needing to piss and just try ignore it. Before I leave the bathroom I check the mirror to see my pupils, and they are huge, almost covering my whole eye. 11 AM, I played computer games, Counter-Strike Source, the last hour, but I don't want to play anymore because I'm playing so poorly and ruining my rank. I feel like I'm really stoned and I can't focus on anything. I want to go to my room and just lie down for a while, but just then my mom comes home. She starts talking to me and I realize I can hardly understand her, and when I try to reply it is extremely difficult for me to speak. She notices something is wrong with me. I get up to go to my room, and at this point gravity was like 5x normal strength and it takes all my energy to not be on all fours. Standing erect is out of the question. My mom looks really worried and asks me what I took. I told her Datura and she knew what it was and asked if I wanted to go to the hospital. I told her that I honestly didn't overdose and please leave me alone. She did. 11:30 AM, I'm in my room, lying in my bed, and I notice as vividly as it can be my first hallucination. The shadows on my wall are flowing like liquid. I was overjoyed and I watched the shadows some 10 minutes and probably would have gone on watching if I hadn't noticed my curtains vibrating at a high speed. Pretty soon all the objects in my room weren't still anymore. I also kept seeing flashes of light. For a second I panicked and imagined how this could easily become a really bad trip, but I calmed down immediately because through the whole trip I was 100% aware that I was tripping and that it wasn't real. 12:45 PM, a friend of mine passed by my house. This was real, to get some buds, and I managed to act normal enough. Gravity was returning to normal, 1.5x strength, and I managed to speak more easily, though I went to the bathroom, and when I returned I forgot that anyone came over and was surprised to see my friend sitting on my bed. He didn't stay long. 1 PM, I think I started peeking at this point because things got really weird. After my friend left I felt like he was still in the room with me. I would answer out loud to imaginary questions he asked me, and the moment I replied I would realize what I had done. I felt like he was handing me stuff, and when I reached out for it I again would realize what I did. I actually really enjoyed this. 3 PM, I was surprised when I looked at the time because I felt like it was 1:15 PM or something and my friend had just left. Hallucinations were very intense at this point. My floor was covered with tiny black ants. There was a snake on the wall which in reality was just a crack in the wall. Any dirt spots on my wall were bugs crawling around. If I stared at anything for a few seconds it would morph and a sort of video started playing. I didn't control what the video would play, it was totally random stuff. 7 PM, the delirium is subsiding but the hallucinations not. I can feel the narcotic buzz of the Datura and I like it. I eat some dinner and go to my friend's house. I can drive my bike normally. The entire next day I felt the narcotic Datura buzz and I got kind of sick of it by the end. I still had minor hallucinations for 2 days and my vision was blurry for 3 days. I really enjoyed this experience, but it was purely for entertainment and I didn't learn much from it, except trust your instincts if they tell you don't take more. If I had drank that second cup I probably wouldn't have had such a positive experience. I will definitely do Datura again, but I don't recommend it to anyone unless they know exactly what the effects are and are absolutely sure that's what they want. My friend and I tried Datura as our first organic trip, for chronic lack of any other available psychoactive substance, mid-1997. We were not aware of the toxicity of Datura. We boiled the leaves and yellow trumpet flowers for a couple of hours, mixed with copious amounts of Milo, and strained into a thermos as we planned to drink it at halftime of an AFL football match, Geelong vs Sydney. What were we thinking? Just for fun. We drank 2 small cupfuls each, and after about 20 minutes the grass of the oval was beginning to float and glow. My friend and I looked at each other and I was taken aback at the sight of his eyes. The pupils were pinpricks and I realized I must look the same. Gravity was beginning to prevail upon me and I realized there was a long day ahead. At 3/4 time I knew I had to head for home. We had walked 30 minutes to ground. My legs would not work properly and I stumbled across the row. We were sitting in the members' stand. What a sight we must have been. My friend, in the grips of his own malady, decided to stay until the end of the game, and exit with 30,000 other people. Gripping the stair rail for direction, I felt numbly wise for sneaking out quietly. The walk home consisted of repeat auditory hallucinations. I must have turned around 20 or 30 times as I heard people calling out to me. Vaguely familiar people would appear ahead on the footpath, and as I would finally reach them they would disappear into the concrete below my feet. None of this was alarming or enjoyable. My mind was dull and I was just trying to get home. My friend arrived home about 50 minutes after I did, and we really couldn't communicate with each other. He told me he saw me a couple of times on his walk, like I would step out from behind a bush, and just as he said "there you are," I would disappear again. At about 6 or 7 p.m., I got it into my head that I had to work that night, though I was of course in no state to do so. My friend, being equally deluded, and even though we had planned to leave the night free to trip, believed me and walked round the corner to his parents' home. He fell through the front door and his entire family was home. He found himself explaining to his mother about the football, and then she would disappear and he would realize the entire family was looking at him as he had been talking to thin air. His dad sent him off to bed before his mother broke into tears. He was 19 years old at the time, from a conservative Christian family. It had worn off by midnight and I felt much better, except for blurry eyesight which returned to normal the next day. We didn't realize it at the time, but it took us a couple of months to emerge from the mental cloud that Datura caused. We were both very interested in psychedelics and have had much more satisfying experiences in recent years with more user-friendly substances. It seems like we resorted to Datura due to lack of information or availability of other alternatives. I would not recommend Datura to anyone. It is the only psychedelic I regret taking, and my friend agrees. I had heard around the neighborhood that kids had been ingesting a plant called Jimson weed, also known as Datura or angel trumpets. They spoke of cool visuals and strange thoughts. I had been told of a location where plants were growing, and decided to give it a try. Certain people who had experienced this plant warned against it, but after all the hype I wasn't going to miss out for anything. So my cousin Bob and I went to the spot and picked a grocery bag full of the prickly pods, which we had been told to open up and eat the seeds. After eating the seeds we became very sleepy, and our speech was quiet and strained. We felt extremely weak and couldn't stop yawning. We thought maybe we should walk around. We went to a nearby shopping mall, but quickly left because this plant rapidly started to consume us. Little did I realize that I was in for the ride of my life. Mind you, I am no stranger to hallucinogens, heroic doses, or bad trips. I kept thinking that I had a cigarette in my hand. I even felt it there, but when I went to hit it, it had disappeared. I was having conversations with people who were not even there. It was like being absolutely asleep, dreaming, but walking around and talking. We hooked up with a sober babysitter, and he brought us to a pool hall nearby. What a disaster. Let me remind you that you have no real grip on the reality around you. You might get busted doing something outrageous and come back into reality for a moment, panic, and slide right back into the spirit world. Anyway, while at the pool hall I managed to chew on a piece of chalk, and take balls off the table in the middle of a game, walk across the room for some reason, and hide them behind a cigarette machine. My babysitter, Joe, realizing that we were far more intoxicated than he had expected, escorted us out of the pool hall before danger of the law became a reality. Everybody in there was laughing at us. Joe said that we just looked really serious and confused. Actually, Joe should probably be the one writing this. For about 10 hours I can hardly remember anything. His story is far more detailed. Look kiddies, this plant is no joke. I don't think it would be going too far to call it extremely dangerous. At least when you're hallucinating off of acid or shrooms you can usually tell that you're hallucinating. On Datura you're fucking delirious. I didn't really have a bad experience, but I wouldn't even think about doing it again. It's more fun for a sober friend to watch. I'm telling you, you have absolutely no idea what's going on. This is the shit that will have you jumping out the window. Peace. Datura is not a worthwhile adventure. About 15 years ago I ate a number of Jimson weed seeds and only remember about 2 hours of extremely severe phantasms. This was 2 hours of consciousness out of almost 3 days of heavy-duty delirium, visions/fantasy, lucid dreams. I wouldn't call them hallucinations in the LSD on psilocybin sense. They were completely otherworldly. I was completely gone. My friends and sister had to take care of me. I was a danger to myself and others. I am surprised no one took me to the hospital. I was a teenager and my parents were out of town. I remember having a long conversation with my alarm clock on the nightstand while trying to sleep and other weirdness. After about 2.5 days I was pretty aware of things around me again but remained poisoned for about a week. My vision got back to normal after a few days. I have never heard good things about using the tropane group of alkaloids for recreation, of which Datura and atropic belladonna belong, although I have a lot of books by Hoffman, Schultz and others who document the use of Datura and related plants among shaman of South America and native Southwestern Americans. Not to mention the Wiccans of old Europe. I think if you have someone skilled in the use of medicinal plants, these two plants are very helpful for pain relief, asthma and other illnesses, ceremonies etc. In fact you can buy OTC in most health food and vitamin stores. In the homeopathic remedies section a product called belladonna 6X. It is used for fevers and neuralgia. But if you do not know the potency of the plant and its origins and how much to even begin with eating, my advice is don't fuck with it. I can remember that shit like it was yesterday and it was not fun. Hope this helps. Well, where do I begin? Me and 2 friends found a Datura plant just growing in some garden. We've heard that if you eat it you trip. It sounded cool. And we're stupid 16-year-old, so why not? We didn't know how much to take so we decided to cut the fruit to 4 pieces and each eat a quarter. As I said, we didn't know what it was and how much to take and in retrospect, it was way too much. From what I've heard you're only supposed to take a few seeds, 10 tops. We each took like 20 or 30. We didn't even know how to take it and we just swallowed the seeds, since I've read you're supposed to put it in hot water and boil it. Anyway, so we eat the seeds and just hung and walked around. It took it like 30 minutes to start and I really can't say that I remember much. All I know is that it was pretty cool for the first few hours. We were tripping like hell but I also did a lot of acid at that time so I was used to that. Then after the first few hours we all started throwing up and both me and the 2 girls said that our eyes went blank. I couldn't see anything, everything was just white and I wasn't even tripping, not visually anyway. I felt weird as hell, like nothing before. As I said, I can't remember much but the thing lasted 4 days. I don't know where I was or what I did. I remember throwing up a lot and sweating like a horse. I was definitely not okay. I kept fainting and falling asleep on and off. It's like I was in a totally different state of existence, unlike acid or any other thing. Much stronger even than DXM. Unlike anything I've done before or since. I can't say it was pleasant. And I can definitely say I will never do it again. But, maybe if I knew how to take it it wouldn't have been that bad. I had flashbacks of those 4 horrible days for like 2 months, both seeing and hearing things of stuff I experienced while I was on it. The feeling of throwing up and sickness that I felt while on the stuff was the worst feeling ever. Bottom line, don't do it. But if you're gonna do it anyway, take just a small amount, like 5 to 10 single seeds. My ma grew a big angel's trumpet tree in our backyard, huge white flowers up to 30 centimeters long. For about 6 months I ripped into it fairly regularly. First time we used 12 flowers to make a tea, boiled it all up for 15 minutes in 2 liters of water. 5 people drank a cup each. We filled a bourbon bottle with the remainder and went to a party. The party was all straight dudes from the Air Force. The girl in our group felt very uncomfortable and asked me to drive her home. I hid the bottle in the kitchen. I felt pretty normal, just a metallic taste in my mouth, but once we were driving we both forgot where we were going and where we had just come from. The panels and bonnet of my car started breathing and sprouting veins through which I could see a liquid moving. It was more beautiful than a worry, so I drove on. It turned out we were on our street. We recognized our own house as we drove past it. So I dropped off my friend and returned to the party. Nice guy, I know. I found the bourbon bottle sitting empty on the kitchen table. An hour later, about 15 people were sitting quietly in the lounge watching the ceiling continually rise, the walls breathe in and out. Everybody seemed content except the friend I had taken home. She hallucinated 4 friends were in her room all night wearing plastic raincoats. 1 week later we made another brew, about the same proportions, but while it was cooking we went to the pub and drank several beers. The brew had boiled dry and burnt by the time we returned, so we put in 4 cups of water and boiled it up for 10 minutes. 4 of us had a cup each. In under 10 minutes the walls were breathing, my mouth was lined with alfoil, none of us could speak, just croak. After another 10 minutes, my arms were breathing, spurting rainbow-colored fountains on the out-breath. My hands turned into green-scaled claws, still breathing with massive veins swelling across them. My friends chose their courses of action. One took 2 sleeping tablets, don't know what, and went to bed. Another tried to walk home, about 20 kilometers, midnight Sunday, went in the wrong direction, got picked up by a friend at 4 a.m. Sounds odd, but it seems to happen on Datura. The third was picked up from my house by another guy, who dropped him home. In his bedroom were waiting a selection of his ex-girlfriends, who just silently stared at him all night while they sharpened knives and loaded guns. I went to bed. At first I kept melting, then I kept dropping lit smokes onto my bed and searching for them in a panic. Next, just about every person I had ever met in my whole life came into my bedroom, one at a time, through the window, through cracks in the wall, or just appearing. From one crack came a human body with a sheep's head. The head was rotting and the sheep started buying at me. The head changed into my ex-boss, who calmly reassured me everything was alight. At this point I decided the only way to stop this trip was to kill myself. I wanted to go to the kitchen and get a knife, but I couldn't find my bedroom door or even window. Where there used to be a door was now a blank wall. I blacked sometime after that. In the morning, the guy who had taken sleeping pills woke me up. I was naked, my hands and knees cut up and covered with blood, still tripping but kind of sane. My mate took me out to the backyard. Our entire picket fence had been pulled down, all of my clothes I had been wearing the previous night were scattered up the back alleyway. I have no idea what I did for about 12 hours, running naked around an inner-city suburb, in the early hours of a Monday morning. I had a top-up on Monday night, and tripped until Wednesday night. None of us could read anything for about 4 days after. None of my friends took Brugmansia or Datura after that. I did, but was a bit more careful except one time. Used a Datura shrub, about 1 meter high, small yellow flowers, made a tea from the flowers, put it in a small plastic soft drink bottle. We went to a bikes rally, Harley Davidsons and what all, don't ask why. At the rally, nobody wanted to drink my brew, so I drank the lot myself. I came back to me about 30 hours later. I was pissing and realized I was no longer wearing underpants, then I noticed I was wearing nothing at all except someone else's jeans. My clothes, wallet and keys were all gone. I walked out of the toilet and found I was at a friend's house. It was about 11 p.m. the next day. I have no memory of this entire period and my gear was never found. One day a good friend of mine named Dave told me that he had Datura, and that I'd trip nuts. Me at the time already had experience with spirit walk, snurf or snuffadelic pills, etc., was more than obliged to take him up on his offer. I had tripped many times, and loved it. I went to his house sometime in the evening. He had ordered a large baggie of Datura leaves off the internet. I'd say around 9 p.m. or so we ground up a good 12 grams or more into a semi-fine powder. We then got some Lipton tea bags and emptied the contents and replaced them with our Datura powder. We boiled the bags in the water until it was a dark green like he had read on the web. We poured 1 glass apiece and chugged the gut-wrenching tea down, doing our best to ignore the horrible smell and taste. Writing about it makes me sick, it's so bad. After about 30 minutes or so we just felt like we were really drunk. So I decided to drink another glass but only finished half of it. Bad idea, people. Another 20 minutes flew by and I realized that I felt like there was not the least bit of moisture in my mouth and throat. It was very hard to swallow and I felt like I had to urinate very badly. But as most reports conclude, only drips follow the have-to-pee sensation. We decided to go into Dave's room to listen to some good old mindless self-indulgence. which happens to be fucking awesome music to listen to while tripping or just straight stoned. He sat at his desk chair in front of his computer and I sat in another desk chair a few feet away. As I silently enjoyed the music, I began to notice a scratching sound close to my head. I turned to see Dave's zombified iguana, with blood pouring from its mouth, perched on the back of my chair. FYI, Dave's iguana died a week prior to this day. Not remembering I was tripping, I ran from his room across the hall into the bathroom, smack into the wall near the sink. I got up and looked in the mirror and the sight of my own face made me laugh uncontrollably. I then left the bathroom and walked into the living room where Dave's sister was having a little get-together with her friends. They were unaware I was on anything until I ran up to one of her friends and fell to the floor 2 feet in front of them because my legs suddenly gave out as I was running. I got up and sat on the couch and thought I was fishing. I know this only because of eyewitness accounts. Haha, I don't remember fishing. I then got up, not sure how much time I took to fish, but I remember making my way into his driveway to see a platoon of modern-day US soldiers scouting his yard. I brushed it off, not thinking anything odd about it. I walked to my car to find my 14-year-old brother, who wasn't even in the same city at the time, in my driver's seat. I got all pissy and demanded that he get the hell out of my car, but he just sat there staring out the window. So I told him I was gonna go tell my mom, who wasn't there either. I proceeded to the front door of Dave's house, and took one last look back to see that my car door was open but no one was in it. So I got in my car and tried to start it, only to break my key off in the ignition. At that exact moment I didn't give a shit. I got out, shut the door and went back inside and went to the bathroom to piss. I managed to urinate successfully, yet I imagined that I unzipped and all. I pissed my pants and then just stood in front of his toilet until his older brother barged in to find me soaked in my own urine. He asked me what happened, and knowing what I did, I for some reason told him that somebody threw beer on me. Long story short, I ended up finally falling asleep, and awoke the next day at 10 a.m. when I was supposed to be at work at 9. I went to work late thinking the trip was over, only to spend my first 3 hours at work talking to coworkers that didn't work that day, and customers about random problems I had going on at that time. My manager realized I was on something and sent me home. Needless to say, I should have been smart like Dave and read up on this shit before doing it. I've done it 3 or 4 more times since, only to do even crazier shit. But I've typed entirely too much as it is, so I hope what I've written thus far is educational in some twisted way. P.S. Breaking my key off in the ignition was probably the worst of this particular trip, but I've had extremely way worse events occur during later Datura trips. Even though I've done it a total of 5 or 6 times, I refuse to ever do it again because of things that have happened while on it. I've often thought back these 10 years to the time I was innocent enough to believe that hallucinating was something one did and remained aware that one was doing. Something that made you say, wow, look at that. I'm really tripping out. I see strange stuff. Well, in the end I guess it was that belief I dreamed up out of thin air. We were in Fayetteville, Arkansas, myself and several others. One of us had heard of this plant called Jimson weed. If you made a tea out of it you could drink about a glass full and trip for hours. So at about 11 o'clock that morning we decided to do just that. At first I didn't feel a thing. Probably an old wives' tale, I thought. So I returned to the kitchen for another glass. After a little while I gave up. I'm not one to pursue intoxication to the point of embarrassment, so I decided that it just didn't seem to work for me. I got up to leave and noticed something odd had happened. Gravity had multiplied to such a point that I was slowly being sucked into the ground. I had to fight to hold on to the chair I had tried to stand from, but to no avail. The coffee table offered no support as well, and panic-stricken, I surrendered to the floor silently, deciding that the best thing to do was to try and sleep. Which I did. For about 12 hours. Fast forward to midnight. Across town. I wake up in my own bed in the apartment I shared with a friend. In the top shelf of my closet there sat the mother of one of my friends. She told me she was watching over the girls who were knelt beside my bed praying. I stood up and turned to see these 2 young girls I'd never seen before kneeling at my bedside silently praying. I got really quiet and told Edie, the woman who turned out to be a pair of pants I'd left hanging off the top shelf, that I would leave them in peace and only return to get cigarettes as needed from the top of my dresser. I went out into the apartment and went into the kitchen. I turned on the faucet to get some water and somehow decided that I should leave it running considering how thirsty I was. Little did I know, I had also stopped the sink up somehow. I turned and faced the blank wall on the other side of the room and stared in amazement as the soft sounds of flowing water filled the room. After an eternity of this my roommate came in, somewhat dismayed about the water running all over the place. He snapped me back into reality enough for me to tell him I was trying to stay out of my room so as not to disturb the girls praying. I lit an invisible cigarette, took about 2 drags and watched it disintegrate. This annoyance repeated over and over for hours. He asked me what the hell I was on and if that was what our buddy from across the complex had taken as well. I told him what I could and then offered to go and get our friend and keep him out of trouble. I found Mark lying underneath a parked car in the parking lot. I assured him it was safe to come out and he did, only to promptly crawl under the car right next to it. This happened again for about 5 cars. Once he got over that, he said he needed to flick some pebbles into a circle first and then he would come over to my place with me. So I waited as he made a circle of rocks and then started flipping pebbles into the middle like some combination of tabletop football and golf. Meanwhile, I kept trying to figure out what the deal was with these cigarettes disappearing after 2 drags. We stayed out there probably 20 minutes or so and then he conceded to joining me at my place. But not until he sought out and found his drink, this container of Lori's seasoned salt. I remember thinking how weird, I always wondered who drank that stuff. Then I told him that he needed to crash out like I had and things would calm down for him. I turned out all the lights and closed my eyes. Then I read out loud from this book you didn't have to have your eyes open to read. It didn't take long for Mark to decide he wasn't going to sleep. I took off one of my shoes and turned the lights back on. I noticed that he only had one shoe on too. Then something I have wondered about for years happened. I looked over at Mark, busy drinking his salt, and said, "Hey, watch this." I put a cigarette in my mouth and lit it. "Watch." I took a drag. I took another drag and it disappeared as usual. That's when Mark said, "Where did it go?" "I don't know." I said, "It keeps happening." I thought I was the only one it was happening to. He told me one of his smokes had disintegrated earlier too. I never told him what I was seeing. I figure my hand movements must have been enough to imply what I was seeing, but in the state we were in I could have been talking about hey and why thing. But clear as day he watched my hallucination, and not only that, he watched my hallucination disappear. All the while drinking salt. The next day we hooked up with the others who had drank the tea. We found out that almost every one of us had taken off one shoe. We all were smoking imaginary cigarettes. We all had conversations with people who weren't there. One of us had stripped down naked and ran across the U of Arkansas campus and spent the night in jail watching a TV that wasn't in his cell. But to me the weirdest thing of all has got to be the girls praying at my bedside, who I visited on different occasions all through the night, and Mark watching my hallucination without me describing it to him. I don't condone the use of any one particular drug. I don't believe that what works for one person, one way, is going to ever work for anyone else the exact same way. But most of all, I don't think that the drug Datura is inherently evil. I think drank as a tea, in a moderate dose, it can unlock chambers of the ego unattainable by our own subjective measures. If it's possible for 2 people to see the same thing, that usually means it's because something is really there. I know it's probably more common for people to see the same stuff while tripping, but for the last few years I kind of enjoyed thinking that I was the only one that saw such things. I hope that if you use this drug you will exercise a kind of Kierkegaardian subjectivism. It might really be there. You just might be the only one to see it. But that doesn't mean it's not there. And most of all, consume less, enjoy it more. Just be careful. To all you people who say that Jimson weed is stupid and that no one should try it. Personally, I like Jimson weed. It's cheap, about $10 a pound, and it can get you really screwed up. What I like about Jimson weed is that when you make tea from it, you can easily control your high/trip. Just bring about 1.5 cups of water to a boil, turn heat down, throw in about 3 or 4 good-sized pinches of Jimson with a tea bag, then let simmer for about 15 minutes. The water should turn a brownish color. Strain mixture into a glass and drink up. If you're wondering how much to drink, then read on. If the tea is a light brown and you can see the bottom of the glass, then 1 glass will make you feel a little bit high and a little bit drunk. If you cannot see the bottom of the glass, then about a quarter of it will give you the effects just described. A half of a glass will make you feel even more drunk, and a full glass of the strong stuff will make you start to trip a little bit, about the same effect as taking 1 hit of pretty good acid. If you drink more, all I can say is be careful. When you're really screwed up off Jimson, you will feel very drunk and fall down a lot. But you don't puke, you smoke imaginary joints and cigarettes and still get high from the imaginary joint. Anything you pick up won't be in your hands much longer. Smile. All the stuff I just described is if you drink a lot or if you make really strong tea. The tea will taste kind of gross. If you're wondering about one of my experiences, then read on. I boiled about 1 cup of water and put about 5 big pinches of Jimson in the water. The tea was very dark and tasted very gross, but I wanted to get fucked up and I did. At first I didn't feel it and was complaining. It seems that everyone who says they don't feel it gets the most fucked up. Well, about 30 minutes later I couldn't stand up. I sat down and almost fell out of the chair. My friend passed me a joint and I took it into the kitchen, dropped it, then went and sat on the couch and started smoking an imaginary joint. I kept trying to pass it, wondering why no one would take it. Then my friend said, "Wanna hit this?" As he passed me the bong. I smacked it out of his hands. After he filled it back up with water, he passed it to me again and I tried to take a drink out of it. Thank God he didn't let me, cause I would have chugged it. I probably dropped about 5 beers altogether and smoked at least 3 imaginary cigarettes. There's a lot more that happened, but those were the parts I remember the most. I do have a friend who drank 2 glasses of the strong shit and was making drug deals with the toilet. So I don't advise drinking more than 1 glass. Hope this gave you a better understanding of Jimson weed. Background: when I experienced the trip just prior to Halloween of this year, I had already used alcohol and cannabis extensively. Many morning glories, see Everything is Dancing, nightshade, Jimson weed, diamond hydronate, nutmeg, mushrooms, nearly all prescribed opiates, around 6 or 7 SSRIs and mood stabilizers, nitrous, kava, DXM and some unmentionables which I fail to recall. I'm not exceedingly reckless since I'm more of the shamanistic mindset. This was the 3rd, or 4th, arguable, time I have investigated the qualities of a Datura trip. Regardless, this time was the most intense. It was also the most monumental trip I ever had. Hence I wrote this report. Datura-induced insanity is in essence a schizophrenic experience. I dream while I am awake. I believe it has something to do with its effect on the cerebral cortex. It is shamanistic, and as I described to a friend earlier today, Datura is psychedelic period. It teaches me to appreciate my sanity. Preparation, ingestion and onset. For this trip, myself and 2 friends A and B steeped many very large dry Jimson weed leaves. This took some time as we allowed excess water to evaporate, leaving a dark near black ichor. To this we added mint tea and sugar, which nearly masked the nasty part of the taste. Friend B couldn't take the taste, so I additionally drank her dose, rationalizing I was of strong enough mind. It was the juice of the logos. 20 minutes after dosing, I was very apprehensive with the foreknowledge that this trip was to be beyond insane. I was already Datura stoned, by that point toked on good herbals, and sinking with a heavy feeling into my friend's bed. I was worried because I knew that this time I would trip balls. Not a good mindset. 1 hour had rolled by when I started tripping. The trip is best described more qualitatively at this point. The trip in summary. I didn't plan to write a report for this, so it is disjointed. Most of the time I spent sitting in my friend's apartment after A and B passed out shortly after dosing. While other friends drank a shitload of beer and went crazy, I maintained a surprising amount of sanity and, more importantly, control. You have to steel your nerves when tripping on Datura. I kept looking down at my lap to see different objects in my hands. I must have smoked 7 fake cigarettes. All the while, everywhere I looked I would see people that weren't there. The most memorable hallucination was when I took a break from the sanity of my friend's music and TV. I looked down to see my hands rapidly playing a Fender Stratocaster, possibly a Fat Strat. It was that detailed, and the memory still is here today. While tripping on Datura, I do not notice the hallucination to be a hallucination till after it occurs. I realized while tripping that I could tell fantasy from reality by taking an object or person in question and physically look away from them/it. When I looked back, the hallucination, if it were that, would be gone. Before tripping, I had hypothesized that by utilizing methods of lucid dreaming, meditation, and ways of awakening from a dream, I could control my own mind. It worked. Datura is a Dramamine trip with less baggage that can be more extreme. Though words can be used to express accurate details, they misconstrue, alter, and leave out many of the broader, more subtle messages of thought. My friend who drove me back to the dorm that night gave me a cigarette, which I gradually proceeded to forget was real, believing it was just another of an endless stream of fake ones. While heading back, I dropped it in my lap, regarding the issuing smoke as a hallucination. It wasn't till my friend asked about the cigarettes that I realized it was real. That was about 5 minutes later. Luckily I didn't catch on fire. When I returned to the dorm, I continued seeing people that weren't in my room. I also had several conversations out loud. One was to a makeshift bong. I wish it were on tape. It was an entity when I talked to it. The trip got me thinking a lot more in the philosophical and theological sense. Looking back, I ponder if I was talking to my ancestors? Or spirits? Maybe Datura shows another dimension of conscious, a plane where spirits reside inside our own personal reality. That started me reading a lot of Descartes, Berkeley, Hartshorne, and Whitehead. Later on in the trip, while looking into the mirror in my dorm room, I saw someone else mimicking me. Then I recalled it as a common effect, like the fake cigarettes. That laid the matter to rest. The after effects of the trip was a cleansing feeling of catharsis, and pupils which were dilated for a week. As an aside to the wise, one must realize before taking Datura that there is no going back. It is like acid in the sense that it lasts so long and won't stop. I wanted the trip to stop with Datura. In the case of acid, where I wish my closed eyesight to be painted black to get away from the colors preventing sleep, with Datura it's a whole new ballgame, since I'm trying to get away from voices in my head and those things I see. Ultimately, it's amazing our minds have so much potential. When I trip, I discover what I already know, Socrates in the Meno. Whether it's of the logos or one's singular subconscious, at this point it is anyone's call. I think Datura research could provide answers to many of questions, scientific and spiritual. I noticed I was left-handed while under its influence and have circumspect way. I will continue to examine Datura's psychedelic effects in the future. To me it is deeper than any other psychedelic. To close, remember, never abuse drugs, respect them. Do your homework and enter a trip with an introspective mindset, otherwise you may come to harm or fall into a pattern of abuse that could leave you impaired or dead. Notes, extended background and words of advice. Read up on this entheogen, and once you've decided you can take it, do not take it for a week. Make sure you know the dosage. Have a sitter, you could die. No sharp objects, or fire, no cigarettes. Watching TV gave me a break. BTW tripping. It calmed me down. I actually prayed as a sign of respect when I took the leaves from the Datura. According to the Chinese, when you pick the leaves, the feeling you experience at the junction in time will be what you feel when you dose. I kept this in mind and was at peace throughout the trip. Self-fulfilling prophecy? Placebo? Respect Datura as you would any religious sacrament. It is one and has been used for thousands of years, probably by your ancestors, as it is universal. The Piscataway Indians used it ceremonially in puberty rites to talk to their ancestors. The leaves I procured grew in the middle of a field on my grandmother's farm. The land was an old Indian settlement, and one easily finds artifacts dating back an easy 6,000 years. That means there's an interesting and damn good chance those Datura plants were descended from a long line of plants used shamanistically. I wonder who used them between us and the Piscataway. And what did we see? I've been reading these reports on people's experiences with Datura, and I'd like to add my take on it. Over the course of the year, I was a big fan of Datura. It was cheap, legal, and freely available. Once tried, all else seemed like child's play. It's hard to describe the effects of Datura, but in general it was otherworldly. I can see how people got bad trips on it because it is not quite like any other drug. It is possible to get stuck in no man's land on it, and get really freaked out. There is no way out once you begin, and it can last for several days, which is way too much for most. Personally, I believe it did me the world of good, though it took some years to properly assess and come to terms with the things I came across. I believe it takes you away from yourself and into the universal. It is no way an ego drug, in fact it destroys the ego completely. One of the pleasant effects that seems common to Datura is telepathy. This is a profound and moving experience. It has to be done to be believed. Sure, I hear you say, you were so gone you could have thought anything was happening. Believe me, it was for real. I suppose I'm a bit of a believer in the no pain no gain thing, so the physical and mental price of such an intense tripping was worth it to me. I would only advise people who know no fear of themselves to take Datura. There is no way it should be taken lightly or as an escapist thing. It would be preferable to have a minder, also to record some of the things you will say, as they will surprise you later. As with all drugs, stay away from negative people and situations. Like vampires, they will suck the life out of you. I hope this helps someone make the choice that is right for them. Whoa. That's how I shall preface this. Just last week was the first time I had even heard of this stuff. The person who gave me the seeds told me the story of the soldiers at Jamestown, and I thought, wow, I have to try this crap. Now, I am no novice drug user. I've pretty much tried everything, but I don't think I was prepared for the stinkweed trip. Okay, I had about 11 grams of Jimson weed seeds, so I ground them all up into a powder almost. Initially I tried to smoke a pinch or two in my bowl. This didn't seem to have any effect, so I began to eat it in gram increments. I would wait about 20 minutes and then eat another gram. Nothing seemed to happen, although I did start to feel a bit floaty, and my peripheral vision was blurred and full of motion that didn't really exist. At this point I was very disappointed, so I went to bed. Well, evidently it takes longer to kick in than I expected, because when I got up to go to the bathroom about 2 hours later, my motor functions did not exist at all. I fell at least 24 times, and ran into every piece of furniture in existence in my apartment. I broke at least one toe, cracked 2 ribs and bruised my tailbone, let alone the scrapes and bruises on my forearms, knees and buttocks. I also was talking gibberish, according to my mother, with whom I live, and whom I scared shitless during this event. I walked into her bedroom at 5:30 a.m. and began rummaging around. When she woke and asked what I was doing, I replied relax. And then let loose a 10-minute stream of gibberish, which I felt made perfect sense. I also had in-depth conversations with myself, although I cannot remember what the hell about. I imagine I was still pretty fucked up for almost 2 days. I was unable to read small print as well until this afternoon, 2 days later, and I have finally stopped seeing weird movement in my peripheral vision. Aside from the injuries I sustained, I think I would try it again, in a smaller dose, and preferably with someone else, and most likely outdoors, where there is no furniture or doorways to navigate. If you're considering trying this stuff, be wary, take small doses. Over the past few months I have been reading and trying to obtain Datura. My goal is to find a hallucinogen that has crazy hallucinations, and one that is easily obtainable. So I read about 90% of the trip reports, and how almost all of them are negative, but thought that I was above that. Man, was I wrong. I am going to describe what I thought might be a fun, short trip that turned into a long loss of control. 10:30 p.m., feeling good, anxious, and ready to trip. So I start to make a tea out of 100 Datura seeds. I got a mortar and pestle out, which had no effect at all in smashing the seeds. So I emptied out a green tea bag and replaced the tea with 100 halfway smashed seeds. Next I filled a glass almost to the top with water and stuck in microwave for about 2.5 minutes. Then my parents got home, so I had to pause the process and pretend to be doing something else. 11:30 p.m. Parents just went to sleep. Very excited. So I had to stick the water back in the microwave till it was starting to boil. Then I went into my room and dropped the tea bag of seeds into the boiling water. I let it set for about 10 minutes. And then stirred it for about 20 more until it was cooled down enough to drink. Then I ate the seeds in the tea bag, sucked, chewed, then swallowed, and sat down with the drink. 12 p.m., ready to drink tea but decide to add some sort of bottled Kool-Aid drink to help with the taste. I don't really mind it, but it's not great. After about now I lose total track of time. I forget that there is such a thing as time. So the rest of the times are just educated guesses really. 1 a.m., feel extremely disoriented and dizzy only when I stand up. I found that to be odd. I was getting kind of tired and thought that I might not trip, so I watched TV for a while and then decided to go to bed. Even though the effects were getting stronger and stronger, I was getting sleepy. I set my alarm for 5:30 just in case I made a mess or something like that. 5:30 a.m. About half of the rest of this report was told to me or realized later, and the other half is all really blurry, so it might sound weird. Supposedly, I woke up, turned my alarm off, and got into the shower just like I was going to school. It was Saturday. Well, I didn't get in the shower, I just turned it on, and left it on. When my dad woke up at around 6 o'clock he noticed it was on, and that got him confused. Apparently, I fell back to sleep until about 7 a.m. on Saturday. 7 a.m., I woke up and to my surprise one of my friends was sitting in my leather chair and his girlfriend was sleeping on my bed. I kept talking to him and he never spoke back to me. His girlfriend was half asleep, just kind of laying there, so I talked to her. She never said anything back either. None of this seemed odd. I also saw my brother in my room playing Xbox. So I went to get some water or something and came back and all were gone. Next, I went to my brother's room and he was dead asleep. Upon leaving his room, my stepmom started talking to me. We argued back and forth on what day it was. I would have bet anything on the fact that it was not Saturday, even though it was. So I gave up on that at breakfast and went to my room again. This was the zone for people to talk to me. Probably because I consider that my safe trip zone. Where I am always comfortable. 8 a.m., Upon entering my room, the same guy and girlfriend were there but then disappeared. This seemed normal to me. I played music and Xbox for a while and then realized that sitting behind me was my friend who was supposed to come over later that day. I hadn't asked my dad yet about him coming over, so I went too. My dad seemed taken aback by this, so he led me back to my room to show me that nobody was there. I was shocked. So shocked I made excuses of how he could have left my room. Then my dad looked at me and said, "Don't you realize, nobody was ever there, you hallucinated him there." This was kind of a mind-opener to me. I suddenly realized that all the strange crap that happened was not real. Wow. My dad left pissed off I had taken drugs and I sat down unhappy. Then all of a sudden I noticed about 3 random people lounging in my room as if they belonged there somehow. I tried talking to all of them. I had already forgot that they were not real. Then one disappeared from the leather chair and I was screaming at it to bring that guy back. The chair actually smiled at me but said nothing back. I got over it quick and gave my attention to the Xbox. Then I noticed people coming and disintegrating all from the chair. This went on until my dad came in to talk with me about doing this drug. I thought he could see the people in there with me, so I was trying to play it all cool. When he left, all the people were looking at me and smiling, even the chair. 3:30 p.m. If today was Thursday, it would be time for me to go to rehab group counseling, but it was sad. I got ready and called my friend to pick me up to go with me. While it was ringing, I realized that it was Saturday and I was fucked up out of my mind. Everything gradually went back to normal after that. It was a great experience, but unfortunate that I couldn't remember a lot of it. I had taken about 15 milligrams of Adderall Friday morning. Affected or not? I'll never know. Today is Tuesday, July 3, 2001. Last Thursday was the best 19 hours of my life. I have read many different vaults on the mysterious plant, Datura, which is a phantom in my hometown. My name is Chris, I'm 16 years old and I live in Mesa, A to Z. I am a very broke kid and I am always looking for a cheap high. I have found Datura on the internet, but it's hard to receive packages at my house. I live with my mom, who is very suspicious after she found my ketamine and buds. About a week ago, after an all-nighter, me and my friend Mike were cruising the town of Lehigh when we noticed a small field of moonflowers. After all of my internet research, I recognized this to be the elusive Datura. We picked the ripened pods and took them home in the darkness of the next night. Then, on Thursday, me and my friend Mike drove to the ASU campus to meet a couple of his friends. We met up with this guy Dave, who has an off-campus apartment, around 11 a.m. I then took 2 teaspoons of the seeds while my friend Mike made a tea out of the nab leaves. I drank a tea made in 8 ounces of water and steeped with 2 leaves of Jimson weed. Mike did the same, and Dave rolled himself a joint that he smoked on the patio while we were busy. That cheap bastard wouldn't spot me a bowl. Then we were off. We walked down to Mill Avenue and went walking. About a half an hour later, as we stood in Zia Records, I noticed something strange. Zia is usually pretty empty on a Thursday morning, but it seemed to me there was a crowd of people standing in the corner next to the new Weezer album display, staring at me. As I looked closer, I noticed it was my Spanish class from the year before. I said hello to them, but they just sat there, staring at me. Then I noticed I had dropped my cigarette. I bent down to look for it, but I couldn't seem to find it. When I looked up, the crowd was gone. And then I noticed that I wasn't even smoking cigarettes. I didn't even smoke. I quit about 6 months ago. That's when a sudden cloud of surprise came over me. I looked around and everything seemed normal. My friends came over to me and we quickly left. The clerk had noticed my little conversation with the new Weezer display. Mike quickly became very despondent as we walked down Mill. I began to notice that the blacktop road was kind of moving like a river. We walked and from there my memory kind of fades. I really can only remember little aspects of things from that day. I think that I lost track of Dave and Mike and sat down on the fountain by Coffee Plantation. I don't remember it, but I think that I might have fallen in because I later noticed my socks and underwear were wet. There is little visions that I remember of walking down the street and running into old friends. It seemed that every time I looked down to find the cigarette I had dropped, my friends would disappear. This was a little frightening because it wasn't really the disappearing thing, it was that I could whisper, talk, and yell into my friends' faces and they would just stare back at me, not saying a word. I remember someone asking me to leave where the police would be notified of my behavior. I cannot remember where, when, or what I was thrown out of. I believe that I started coming down somewhere around 2 a.m. the next morning, because I was being talked to by a bum that was trying to inform me that I was sitting on his bench. He was yelling at me, But I was just trying to conceive where I was at. I quickly got up and started walking. The streets were fairly quiet and I quickly became very frightened. I was having a lot of trouble trying to conceive the location and time of my existence. I soon became very despondent and my thought process was just not working right. I decided that my best bet was to find a bench and sleep it off. I quickly found one in a place I simply didn't recognize. I'm almost positive that I fell asleep as soon as I hit the bench. I remember having vivid and lucid dreams of flying and feeling up this woman. When I woke up, I was laying on a green lawn, being told to get my ass off the grounds of the Kappa something frat house by a stern-looking black man. As I was leaving, he told me it was 5:45 in the morning. I felt almost back to normal now, and I quickly realized where I was on the ASU campus. I was only about 3 blocks from Dave's, so I decided to make that my destination. Dave wasn't happy that I woke him up, but he was happy to see me because he said he had not seen or heard from me or Mike since around 1 p.m. the previous day. We noticed Mike's car was out front, which scared at me because I could only imagine where he ended up. I wrote a very sloppy note, "My eyes have trouble focusing right," and pinned it under his windshield wiper for him to find when he got back. I then went up to Dave's apartment to crash on his couch for a couple of hours. I woke around 11 a.m. to Mike knocking on the door. He didn't speak at all. He just came in and laid on the carpet and immediately fell asleep. I would tell you his story, but he's gonna submit it himself to Arrowhead one of these days. We went back to sleep and woke around 3 p.m. I drove home to my mom, who was a little unhappy at my 2-day absence. I was slightly depressed a few days after the experience, but I used small amounts of ketamine to help me out with that. The depression was no big problem, but it took my eyes about 3 days to return to normal. Summary: don't do Datura if you're an unstable person. Personally, I love the shit and have already gone down and picked about another 50 seeds. I will definitely do Datura again. But next time, I will be sure to have a sitter, and I probably will skip on the tea next time. Please, read up on Datura before you decided to do it. Don't just stuff a cup of seeds in your mouth because Datura is poisonous and you can die. If you are just feeling terrible, please just go to the hospital. They will probably pump your stomach, which is no fun. But personally, I would rather have my stomach pumped than die. And on a last note, always read up on things before you try them. Just because it's legal, doesn't mean it can't hurt or kill you.
The first time I ever took Datura, and my only time, was July of 2006. I remember being in the car with my friend, her boyfriend and his 2 friends. Her boyfriend opened the pod for her and the boy money opened mine so I could get my seeds out. Me and her both down the slimy seeds, and I asked to be driven home just in case the experience would be worse than I was wanting, which it was. I remember I was sitting on the computer for an hour, but to me only felt like 5 minutes. I tried to go to bed but would wake up in sweats, flipping, my head twitching after every 3 seconds of laying there. I went into the bathroom and wouldn't stop peeing. I started to crawl on all fours like a dog in a circle continuously, for this was the only thing calming me down. Then I went back to my bedroom, but on the way I fell in the hallway and slammed into my mom's bedroom door. My aunt and mom came running out of their rooms asking me what I was on. My aunt yelled at me to lie in bed, but instead I got on top and crawled on all fours again, and my mom was worried I had already overdosed, so they decided to drive me to the hospital. But at some point my mom said I went back into the bathroom and my pants were to my ankles and blood was all over my legs because I was on my period. They said I would stand on the front lawn looking at the headlights saying, "Ooh, look at the pretty lights." They drove me to the hospital. I went to the hospital, and they said I was grabbing up the doctor's legs, and I swore I dropped something behind the nurse's station. I was restrained to the bed, trying to rip out my 4. They had been trying to make me drink charcoal to pump my stomach, but I kept spilling it all over myself, so they ended up pumping my stomach twice by putting the tubes down both my nostrils. I remember I hated the one nurse and continuously kept trying to punch her in the mouth. My aunt and mom would ask me what I took and I would say, "Where is my cigarettes?" I asked my aunt for crack and cocaine for a friend, but I don't do that and neither does she. When my mom came, I remember talking to her, and she said something to me, and I thought she was a friend, so I would keep blurting out, "You sound just like my mother." I thought Chucky was after me. I saw dead animals piled on top of each other in a corner. I kept thinking I was smoking a cig, then it would disappear. I thought my mom was talking to me through an AIM box. I thought there were twins in my room, snakes, bug, and Dr. Seuss looking clocks. I kept jumping out of bed, and security came and asked me to get back in, and I would be like, "What are you doing in my room? Get out before I punch you in the face." I kept asking why my grandmother had rearranged her bedroom. Hours later, my mom finally got it out of me what I had took, and no one knew what it was, so they were all researching it. My heart almost exploded. My heart rate was 150, so I got sent to Children's Hospital, where I kept thinking giraffes were in the lobby and rap music was playing. I tripped out for 2 days, and all I know is I will never do that again. I'm still afraid to go to bed at night thinking my heart will stop, and I'm always feeling my chest for a heartbeat.
I've seen the Datura plant on my way home from my high school. I've heard it can make you trip pretty good, so I thought it would just be like acid or shrooms. I've tried acid before and loved it, never had a bad experience, so that's why I thought it would just be a swell idea to do Datura not knowing anything about it. It is the biggest mistake I could make. I've been drying the seeds for a long time and thought it would be good to just take about 20 seeds by myself and then go to my friend's house to share. I took the seeds around 2 o'clock in the afternoon and started walking to my friend's house. My friend lives about an hour away, so this is gonna be a long walk. When I got to my friend's house, I had a bad headache and was not feeling the best. I did not think this was the seeds' fault and continued to hang with my friend. My friend was totally down to take the seeds and trip with me. So he took about 20 seeds also. A couple hours go by and I was feeling very heavy and kind of tired. I told my friend we should just go spend the night at my house because his parents were gonna be home in a little bit. When walking home, I noticed that my mouth was getting very dry and my throat hurt, and the trees that I looked at started swaying back and forth, in an unusual manner. My friend told me that my eyes were really dilated. I thought I could see little green creatures peer at us from behind the trees. This did not spook me, however I still did feel very comfortable with my setting. We continued walking, and in the cornfield that we walked by I could see little black dinosaurs running back and forth and then exploding. When I looked ahead in the road, I could see women limping towards me. This disturbed me greatly and I ran off the road into the woods to the left of me. The trees all looked like they had angry expressions, and as I looked back there were rats following me and my friend was nowhere to be found. Next thing I know is I fell into a stream and ran out of the woods into a neighborhood. A car stopped and a very mutilated man came out of the car. He only spoke gibberish and kept doing weird hand motions. I ran the fastest probably in my life. I was too confused to know where to go and was very scared. Next thing I know I was in the hospital where I was being poked with needles and surrounded by machines. I don't really know what happened and how I got there, but someone brought me there and my family was notified. I was okay and got released from the hospital the next day. My family was not mad, they were glad that I was okay. My friend looked for me and tried calling me, and then he notified my brother, who found me 4 miles from my house in a ditch half naked and shaking violently, and that's who brought me to the hospital. True insanity. My first mistake was using a tablespoon instead of a teaspoon per the directions I had read in some booklet. I lived in Kansas at the time, and found the Jimson weed, which has a stem resembling balsa wood, and green pods that have a few spikes on the outside. Maybe 30 per the golf ball sized pod. I split the pod open and it had a quantity of flat, round seeds reminiscent of apple seeds in the color, and small cucumber seeds per the size and shape perhaps. I washed down the tablespoon of seeds with a glass of water, and waited. An hour went by, with no effect, so I smoked a bit, and drank a couple of beers, chalking the experience up to urban legend. I remember glancing towards the bathroom, and seeing 20 or so vividly colored coral snakes pouring out of the drain on the floor. I began to freak. I looked at my stereo speakers on the floor, and through the black mesh fabric cover, I could see what looked like a scene from the movie Willard: rats, scurrying from the bottom to the top, to some impossible place beyond. One stopped, looked at me, and urged me to come on, let's go. Via hand and body language gesticulations, to escape the snakes in the bathroom, headed my way. I was paralyzed with fear, and stunned beyond belief. I had done a lot of LSD, mescaline, microdot, you name it, but no synthetic hallucinogenic had ever been even anything like this. I remember having an incredible thirst. A friend came over, who tried some also, and the visions disappeared, and I felt normal again. We drove to town in my car, me driving, like an idiot, and somewhere along the way, got seriously lost. Suddenly, it was nightfall. I have no idea where the missing 5 or 6 hours were spent. I suddenly discovered I was crawling on the guardrail portion of bridge 70 foot over a river. I remember running through a woods after ripping my shirt off and forcing my way through an electrical fence. It left marks on my hands and chest, and talking with the horse for about 20 minutes. It was using ESP to talk to me. I saw what I called flat rabbits all over the ground. Imagine a rabbit, run over by a steamroller like in Mad Magazine, but the head's not smashed. The rabbits were staring at me like their tortured condition was my fault. They couldn't move, they just whistled real loud. I went to my car, and got in the passenger side, and as I tried to shut the door, a snapping turtle attacked me. I fought with it, threw it out the door, and as I slammed the door shut it jumped in, and I smashed it with the door. Turtle guts and blood were everywhere. Then, they weren't, and lucidity returned. I had lost my keys to my car. As I was walking back towards civilization, I was in the middle of nowhere. Reality went on vacation again. The next thing I remember was pulling myself out of a river and walking up to a house. I was a competition swimmer my whole childhood, so this would not have been a big feat when not under the influence. Somewhere along the lines, my friend showed up again, and we went to the first house we saw. We started throwing stuff from his front yard into the back of his pickup truck. Like a metal tractor wheel, huge rocks. I don't know why, but at the time it seemed pretty important. I woke the owner of the house up 3 times, thinking I was at my boss's house. "Hey, is so-and-so here?" "Oh, sorry. I just walked right in." Finally the police came. They figured I was drunk, and now, a full 17 hours into the trip, I was getting longer and longer bouts of lucidity which helped me say things that made some type of sense. He called a tow truck for me to get my car, which amazingly I was able to describe where it was, and the cop drove me home, with me, all the while mashing my imaginary gas and brake pedals as he drove home with me in the passenger seat. The next day, I could barely see. My vision was completely blurred, and I was unable to focus at all. It took a couple days before my vision returned to normal. My recommendation on Jimson weed if you want to get high, and want to do a real trip full of hallucinations, is to definitely stay away from anything based on belladonna. In other words, this is a definite don't try this period. I have never done it since. I am 42 now, and never will again. It wasn't cool, it wasn't fun. I was 100% out of control, and anything could have happened that I would have had to live with the rest of my life. Anything could have happened. In my misspent youth, I did every drug known to mankind in those days, and that is one I would not ever touch again. Same with PCP, real dangerous, out of control stuff, when the dosage and purity is high enough. It pretty much summarizes why it isn't a popular way of having fun.
I was with my boyfriend and 2 of his semi-outlaw friends in a motel room when I was told we were going to try Jimson weed. I had absolutely no idea what to expect, but anticipated we might get a mild buzz from it. One of the friends prepared a tea, using hot tap water and chopped up stems of the plant, heavily laced with sugar to cut down on the bitterness. He poured us each a glass, and told us to drink it as fast as possible. I understood what he was talking about, because after I drank the first swallow, it felt like my throat was clamping shut and didn't want to let me drink. I managed to drink about 8 ounces of the tea. The effects came on quick, 10 minutes or less. My memories of what happened are spotty. The first thing I remember was standing up to make a trip to the bathroom, and finding that my legs seemed rooted to the ground, feet heavy as lead. I don't know if I was eventually able to walk, or whether I gave up and sat back down. As another person has reported here, Datura is a delusional drug rather than a hallucinatory one. You don't see patterns, trails, or any cool visual effects, you just actually believe in things that aren't there. I remember sitting on the bed, playing with a pearl necklace, then suddenly realizing there was no necklace there. I remember holding a glass for a while, but when I raised it to my mouth to take a drink, my fingers closed around nothingness because there was no glass there. Apparently, eventually my boyfriend and I left the motel, drove to a fast food place to get a snack, then he took me home. I remember none of that. My boyfriend said that when he asked me what drink I wanted at the burger place, I argued with him insensibly about it. I do remember coming home, making it to the living room, then managing to get to the couch to lie down. My mother was there and apparently I said something incomprehensible to her before I crashed. It's the only time I can remember in my drug-taking career when I wasn't able to fake being straight. Several hours later I was able to function somewhat normally, at least until bedtime when I could sleep off the rest of the drug. Using Datura is the closest I've ever come to death. I believe it was trying to shut down my nervous system. Although I was walking around, my mind was unconscious. There was nothing fun about it, no euphoria, no beauty, no cool rushes, no socializing. Just leadenness and isolation and unconsciousness. Of all the drugs I've taken, this is the one that I'd be too scared to ever take again.
This was the first and last time that I'll ever try Datura. I recommend not to ever try it. Well, it was Thursday, October 12, and I had a crap day at school. So my friend and I were looking for some weed to make things better, but we were unable to find any. We were short on money also, so we decided to try angel trumpets. I had heard from another friend that you trip hard off them, and I knew they grew by my aunt's house. So me and, let's call him Bob, went and picked 10 of the flowers. Having no knowledge of the strength of the flower, we only boiled 7 of them. We let the mixture cool, then I added some Kool-Aid to kill the bitter taste my other friends said they had. After downing a regular-sized glass of the mixture, we took a walk into Bob's backyard and just chilled for a while, waiting for the unknown. After sitting around for about half an hour, 2 other friends showed up, so the 4 of us sat outside for about 10 more minutes. That's when I started to feel a heavy sensation on my body. It felt as if I had 5 people hanging on my back. At this time, Bob and the other 2 went inside. I said I'd stay out there cause I began to feel a little sick in the stomach and didn't want to move. Over a course of about an hour of being alone outside, I got an uncomfortable feeling and decided to go inside by the others. As I tried to stand up and walk, I fell to the ground. I had no idea why that happened, and then I got more nervous when I had trouble just trying to stand up. Finally I made it inside where the others were. I had told them what happened. My speech began to slur at this point, and Bob said he was feeling the same thing. After trying to relax, me and Bob became restless and began staggering throughout his house, stumbling over and bumping into everything in sight. After about an hour of that, I decided to take a ride with one of the other guys there. As he started to drive, I began to feel better. I still had trouble talking, so now it's me and my other friend driving, and Bob and the other guy were at Bob's house. After driving for a little bit, he brought me to his place. I don't remember going there or anything I did there. I only know I was there because I was told of it today. According to him, I began roaming throughout his house and I knocked over a stack of Gatorade bottles, then started saying now I'm gonna die because of the bottles. While he tried to talk to me and calm me down, I grabbed a bottle of Pam and began to spray it on his floor, then with my shirt I started to wipe it up. As of now, me and the friend I'm with have no idea what's happening at Bob's house. After rambling about having to go home, he brought me to my house. It's about 9 p.m. We sat in his car and he asked me if I was sure that I could make it safely and without my parents knowing. Having no clue about anything, I said yay. So I got out and staggered to my front door. I notice I don't have my keys, so I ran through my fence. It's not the strongest of fences. This is where I don't remember a thing between leaving my friend's car and getting in my house. Okay, so now I'm in my house and my parents are yelling at me as I try to sit in a chair and keep falling on the ground. All I heard was like, blah blah blah, what the hell are you on, blah blah, what is wrong with you? Where are your shoes? I didn't even know my shoes were off and they said I ran into the sliding glass door we have in our kitchen. From what they told me, I told them I was tossing my football in the air on the mountain in my backyard. After what seemed like days of interrogation, my mom decided that she wanted to bring me to the emergency room to find out what the hell I was on. Walking from my kitchen to the den, I had to have my dad hold me up so that I wouldn't fall. They set me on the couch and told me to empty my pockets, I guess in an attempt to see if there was any evidence of what I was on. All I remembered from that was that I gave my dad $2 and said I had something for him. I then handed him a pocket knife. They were going crazy it seemed, questions were shooting out of each of their mouths. All I could say was something about North Carolina and Indian burial grounds. From there I don't remember the drive to the hospital or entering the ER room. I was told that I had trouble trying to sit, I could never sit in the chair, I kept missing or hitting the armrest. Most of what I have told y'all so far is not all what I remember, but what my parents told me I did. I don't remember passing out, falling asleep or anything. It was like a dramatic skip in frames. I was trying to sit in a chair, and now I'm in a patient in bed. I was given one of those crazy robes that doesn't cover your ass. I take my clothes off and put the robe on, then I was given lots of water. As of now, my distance perception is extremely bad, and I'm now beginning to hallucinate. As I'm laying in the bed, I turn to my side, and I swear I saw a tub of Cool Whip. The hallucinations were so detailed that they had all the markings and prints as the actual stuff has. After blabbering to my dad that I saw a tub of Cool Whip, I began to play with my pencil. I usually always carry a pencil in my pocket. As I'm writing with it in the air, it would disappear, then I'd look for it under the sheets and on the tray next to the bed. No pencil in sight. A couple minutes later, the pencil was back in my hand. The best one of all was the computer mouse. Every so often, I think I'd or at least felt like I would fall asleep, then awake to see my hand on my left pec, tapping it like I was playing a computer game, and worst of all, I'd look for it, thinking there really was one there. Now, being somewhat in the right mind and at home, I noticed that I really thought all of that stuff really existed. It all felt real and it felt as if that's what life was like. I had no clue that I was doped up on that evil flower. I felt weird, but I had no knowledge that none of it was true. Although I was only in the hospital for only about 5 hours, it had felt like days. Throughout my time there, the people in the next room, the rooms were divided by a drape, kept talking and I thought they were talking to me, so I tried to speak back, although in my head what I was saying sounded normal, to my ears it was nothing but gibberish. For a little while, I was left in the room alone. During this time, I kept seeing people from my school. They'd walk by then disappear. A nurse and doctor come in now, but it's not the same ones as before. Seeing this and not having a clue of what was happening, I got scared. I was given a shot in one arm and in the other. They put 4 glass tubes that drew blood. I guess for drug testing. Finally, after the blood was drawn, I guess I fell asleep or something of the sort, because I don't remember anything then. Finally, I'm still feeling some effects, but my parents were told that I was able to be discharged. We get home, and I didn't even know it was my house. I kept asking weird and non-understanding questions. I was walked to my bed, and my mom gave me warm milk to drink. It's now Saturday morning 3:30 a.m. and I have no life, for I am punished for who knows how long. And all that I have heard of with Bob is that he killed his bathroom and is what I guess you'd say cracked out. I still feel a little different. My pupils are still dilated, yet it seems as if something is missing, but I'm in my right senses. This was the most craziest, scariest and most unexplainable event that has ever occurred in my life. Most of what I typed is what my parents said I had done. I vaguely remember this event. It's like I have amnesia. It was a journey, but one that I will never take again, and I hope no one else does. I'm not telling you not to, but only giving a word of advice. Datura isn't anything to play with.